These are 21 lessons from the 21 years of my life. Lesson number 1, to care is to succeed. Oftentimes caring and succeeding are exactly the same thing. If you want to succeed at something, you first have to care about succeeding, which will ensure that you put in the necessary effort and make the necessary sacrifices. Lesson 2, even if it is not your fault, it ought to be your responsibility. This one I originally learned from Mark Manson in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it really is one of the most powerful lessons that someone can learn. Oftentimes we land up in situations, unfavorable situations. Events have happened in such a way, reality has unfolded in such a way that we are not happy with. And it was not due to any of our doing, purely by chance or by someone else's doing. And it's unfair and we feel as though we have been wronged. The solution is not to dwell on the circumstances or to think about how this is not your fault and how now we don't have anything to do with the solution. Even if it is not your fault, it ought to be your responsibility. It should always be your responsibility. If it is your fault, then it's clearly your responsibility. If it's not your fault, this is where a lot of people trip up. It is still your responsibility. And the reason for this is because regardless of whose fault it is, you are bearing the problem. And so if you no longer want to be bearing the problem, then you have to let go of this victim mentality, the sense of entitlement, and you have to start doing something about it. You have to take responsibility. Lesson 3, sometimes you just have to be a little bit less of a bitch. Now, what I mean by this is oftentimes with procrastination, we don't want to work, or there's something difficult in our life that we don't want to face, or we feel like we're being victimized, or we feel like it's unfair, life is unfair, and we don't know how to deal with this, and I have these problems and that problems, and it's very easy to build up a negative energy about yourself and to fall into a slump. The solution is not always to overthink and to try and rationalize. Sometimes you just have to stop being a little bitch and do something about your situation, because no one else is going to come and save you. Then lesson number 4, assumptions are extremely dangerous. Assumptions that you hold about the world, assumptions that you hold about others, and especially assumptions that you hold about yourself. Now, let me just talk about assumptions that you hold about yourself quickly. How often do you hear someone say, I'm just bad at maths, or I'm not good at reading, or I can't do this, or I was predisposed to be fat, I've just always been fat, it's like just who I am, and this and that. And then it happens to become self-fulfilling prophecies because they never put in the effort to overcome this problem that they have or to get better at it, because they've built a mental block around it. They've built it in to their personality. This is something that they are. This is their identity. And so they adopt that identity, and then it's very difficult to uproot it later. Two people that are equally good or privileged or talented in any particular, let's just say towards maths, and they're both perfectly equally positioned to perform in mathematics, and one adopts the identity that they've never been good, where the other one just keeps an open mind. Now, even though they're both equally positioned, this person that has the open mind has less to overcome. So don't give yourself these assumptions, and don't hold assumptions about yourself, especially negative ones, because it makes it harder for you to actually achieve something. There was nothing wrong with this individual, but now they've built something in, and now they have to overcome something that wasn't initially a problem. And so it becomes a lot harder to succeed. So be very careful about the assumptions that you hold about yourself. Then lesson 5, you will fight to keep your identity no matter what it is. So try your best to adopt the best possible identity. This links very closely to holding assumptions that are false about yourself. So when I say adopting the identity, adopting the best possible identity, what I mean is, if you care about something in your life, position yourself in your mind and train yourself to think about you being at the pinnacle of that thing. Train yourself to think about you having learned so much already, for being poised for success, for being capable and competent and at the top of your game. Think about yourself in that way. Think about yourself as a top student if you're a student. Think about yourself as a successful businessman, as a good leader, and then you become these things. And if you adopt that identity, it's more difficult to not be it. And similarly, on the other end, people adopt the identities of poor students, which is why it's so difficult for people to become top students. It's much easier for a top student to maintain their status as a top student than it is for someone to climb the ranks from being a poor student to being a top student. And the reason is not because it's more difficult to actually achieve a result once you've haven't achieved it before. The real thing is that the person who hasn't achieved it before doesn't believe that they can, and they believe all the things that poor students believe. They believe that they don't work hard. They believe that they aren't capable. They believe that they aren't good at learning, and so they don't put in effort to learn. They don't work hard because they just believe that they can't. And so they eventually, even though they would like to be a top student, they actually do end up fighting to keep their identity as a poor student. So if you want to become a top student, start adopting the identity first, and then you can become the top student later. It's more crucial that you adopt the identity that you want to have and then move in alignment with that. So you can give yourself evidence along the way and perform slightly better in a test, and you start to boost it, you start to gain evidence for yourself. This is all helpful for it to be a long-term successful endeavor, because obviously if you try for years and years and you say to yourself you're a top student but you keep failing, then obviously that's not convincing to anyone. So you eventually, if you make progression and you do progress towards this goal, then you start to adopt that on not just a mental level but also in reality. So they will both have to move in alignment with each other. But unless you make the leap first in terms of the identity and in terms of your mindset, it's difficult to make that reality leap before you actually believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself first, is what I'm saying. Okay, lesson number 6. Being virtuous is indescribably valuable. It's the only thing that we have full control over in this world, is the way that we interact with it, how we respond to scenarios, how we go out of our way to help, how we are being the best possible person that we can be. This is very closely linked to the morals of religion. Being virtuous is the most valuable thing that you can do. Aligning yourself with the highest possible good. This is something that no one can ever take away from you, no matter what they do. Viktor Frankl talks about, in Man's Search for Meaning, a similar concept where he says, so for example, he said, the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And when he was in the concentration camps, they took everything away from him. Physical liberty, nutrients, morals, family, everything. And I said morale there, so not morals. The one thing that they couldn't take away is morals. They made it very difficult for him to have high morale, but he, through having strong morals and through aligning himself virtuously and giving life meaning even when there was very little meaning to find, the meaning then was to overcome the suffering. Then through this moral virtue, he was able to persevere and to live through the concentration camps and to eventually overcome low morale. So being virtuous is indescribably valuable in all aspects of your life. Then lesson number 7 is to stop talking about yourself. We often think that people care about what we have to say, but in reality they really don't, and especially when what you have to say is about you. And the instances where people do care about what you say, this is just a harsh truth, they often care that it's going to be a negative thing about yourself more so than they care that it's going to be a positive thing. This is a very cynical view on the world, but it's a useful thing to keep in the back of your mind, because especially if the person that you're talking to is on a similar or lower or equal or even higher sometimes status level, then this person does not want to hear about your successes, because all that they're thinking is, what does this mean relative to my status? And so by talking about yourself, you make yourself disliked very quickly. It comes across as arrogant, and it comes across as even if it doesn't even come across as anything more than arrogant, it still makes them feel inferior or insecure. And so it's not a good route to go. If you want to bring someone to be your friend, or you want to impress them, don't impress them with your achievements. Impress them with how good of a friend you can be, how trusting you can be, how open and honest with them you can be, how much you care for them about their achievements, not about your own. Lesson number 8, fuck everyone else when it comes to your life, and love everyone else when it comes to their life. So we often think that we need to seek advice from other people, or that we can let other people's opinions into our psyche, or that we have to listen to other people, or that advice from someone who's better off than us should be taken. But really, you are the person that's in your situation, and you're the person that has the full responsibility, and you're the person that needs to make the decisions. And so it's a bad idea to always listen to everyone else's advice, because then you never have a focused outlook on life. Now, the reason for this is because if you're getting advice from all different perspectives, it's very likely that you're going to get conflicting advice. And so you'll end up meandering through life, never really pursuing anything directly. So you have to yourself make these goals in your life, and to shut out criticisms and to shut out advice, because not all advice is helpful, and some advice isn't even aimed to be helpful. So be very skeptical and be very, very careful. But then on the flip side, this creates a tendency for someone to have a cynical look on life. It can very easily do that. And so the antidote to this is, while you say, fuck everyone else when it comes to my life, you should love everyone else when it comes to their life. And this is very closely linked to having the highest moral virtue, to aiming yourself in the most virtuous way in your life. Okay, lesson number 9, persuasion is about asking questions to help them see how they should think, instead of telling them how they should think. We've all been in that scenario where you're trying your best to persuade someone of something, or to win them over to your perspective and to your point of view. And no matter what you say, no matter how loud you raise your voice, no matter how you put it, they will not listen. And the solution then, if you really do want to keep persuading them, and it's really of interest to you for them to be on your side, is to not then try and tell them how to think or to show them why you are right, but to ask them questions so that they can arrive at this understanding by themselves. Let them think that they have come up with this idea, because then they will be much more willing to believe it or to take it on board fully. So guide people to your point of view. Don't force it upon them or tell it straight to them if your goal is to win them over. Lesson number 10, the person who puts in the most hours and makes the biggest and highest quality sacrifices always win. I've seen this throughout my life all the time, numerous occasions. I've made videos about this already, so I'm not going to speak extensively on this. In fact, I'm just going to move on to the next one. Lesson number 11, the goal is high quality friends, so treat them like they are, but don't expect them to be, because almost everybody will fall short. This is another seemingly cynical view on life, but let's examine it more closely to see it for what it is. So if you expect something from someone else, it means that you should have a claim to that thing. You have a right, and they have an obligation or duty to fulfill that right. And so expecting someone to be a good friend is a recipe for disaster, because really you have no right to their friendship, even if you have been a good friend. They have no duty to you, even if you have been a good friend to them. You might feel like you do, but you don't. So do not think that everyone around you, because you have been good to them, will in turn be good to you. It doesn't always work like that. You obviously do want high quality friends, but the solution is not to expect it of them, it's to treat them as high quality friends in yourself. This gives you the best opportunity to get them, and never expect anything in return. Okay, lesson number 12. Gratitude is the secret to happiness. Whenever things aren't going well, or even when things are going well, there's only one thing that will always prevail, and that is that there are things in your life that are good and that are going well and that you have to be grateful for. If you want to be happy, happiness is synonymous with gratitude. What does it mean to be happy? It means contentment with your current circumstances, which is very similar, if not no different, to the definition of gratitude. To be grateful is to be happy. They are virtually indistinguishable, at least philosophically. Now, of course, you can go there and you can pick them apart, sure. But if you want to be happy, the only point I'm trying to make is that being grateful is the surest route to happiness. Living in the present, being grateful for what you have. But George, I have nothing to be grateful for. Then you're an arse, because you're living and you have to be grateful for your life. So your life is something that you can be grateful for. And even if you think it's shit, at least you are alive. So at the very least, you have to be grateful for that. And I'm sure there are countless other things that you could also be grateful for. Lesson 13. Quality often comes after quantity. We've all heard that anecdote about, or that study that had pottery students all try and create the perfect pot, and they made one group try and make one perfect pot, and then the other group, their goal was to make as many pots as possible, and then the group that made as many pots as possible ended up with the highest quality pot at the end of the study, instead of the group that just tried to hone in once onto the quality. And this is true for pretty much all aspects of our life, because many things that make up our life and make up success are driven by skill sets, and skill sets need to be honed and developed. If you want to pursue something and you want to be extremely good at that thing, then you have to put in the quantity, you have to put in the hours, the commitment, make the sacrifices, do the practice, and then you can expect the quality. Even if you learn how to do it perfectly at the outset, it is still difficult to execute. It's one thing knowing, and it's another thing executing. So if you want to have high quality things in your life, don't just pursue the knowledge of what it means for something to be high quality. Actually practice that. Practice a high quality life. Lesson 14. Social media for consumption doesn't just add nothing, it actively detracts. I had Instagram for a few years when I was younger, and I deleted it, and I have never looked back. Now, obviously, if you make money from Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, whatever it is, then that's useful to you. So from a consumption perspective, most of the time these social media platforms detract more so than they benefit you. And so you need to be very skeptical and very careful about investing your time there. If you truly want to pursue something else, you have to focus there, and social media is the biggest distraction. And so just completely removing it from your life does you the world of favors. I haven't had Instagram, I've never had Snapchat. I had Facebook, but I never used it. So I've deleted all my accounts on these things, and I promise you, I've never looked back. It's never been something that I've regretted. Now, YouTube is slightly different. So I've derived a lot of value from listening to YouTube videos over the year, but I've also wasted a lot of time. And so at the moment, which I would encourage you to consider as well, it's difficult to cut YouTube out your life, but you should cut these other things out your life, especially if you want to pursue things that are grander than that, which I'm sure you do. So in terms of YouTube, the reason why it's more complicated is because you can't really cut it out. So what I've done that's helped, which you should consider too, is I've removed it from all my devices. I've disabled it, so I'm unable to go in. I've gone into the task center or something on Mac, and I've gone in and disabled it with like 127.00.01 or something. You can go and just search how to disable YouTube without using screen time, and then there's one of the articles there, you'll see it, and then you can go and disable it. So I've done that on all my devices. My phone is only one device that I have that I still have YouTube, and that's on my iPad. And the reason is because I use this the least. It's never in my pocket, and I don't really work on it that much. The only times that I'm working on it is when I'm writing notes in a lecture or at varsity, in which case I wouldn't watch YouTube in that environment anyway, or when I'm filming YouTube videos for my other YouTube channel, my educational YouTube channel, in which case the purpose is consumption, and it's very difficult for me to slip into the trap. So try and make it as difficult to access as possible. So, and then all the other social media platforms, just completely eliminate them. It's well worth it, trust me. Then lesson 15, don't marry your systems and thought processes. Adopt the best approach per scenario and be flexible. So in life, there's generally two approaches. There's an approach of specificity and there's an approach of generality. Now, every scenario calls for a particular solution out of you. Now, the best thing to do is to tailor that solution to that specific scenario. But that comes with the cost of you having to then create consciously solutions for everything. And sometimes a generalized solution can do the job sufficiently such that the costs don't outweigh the benefits. So you want to be at that point where your marginal costs and marginal benefits are equal. Okay, so you need specificity in terms of achieving the best outcome possible, but specificity often comes at a high cost. And so that's when systems are useful. So it's useful to have systems in your general life to speed things up and to set you up for success, and to systemize things that are repetitive tasks that you're going to end up doing repetitively. That's useful, but be very careful about marrying your systems, because it can be the case that they become outdated in the sense that they're no longer useful for your particular scenario. So don't marry your systems, but they are still useful to have. So just apply to the scenario. If you think it's useful to switch systems, then by all means go ahead and do that. But be very careful about switching too often, and likewise be very careful about marrying your systems. Lesson number 16 is to work in longer chunks. So if your goal is to study a large amount of hours, or to put in a large amount of hours into your business or whatever it is that you do, it's difficult to overcome the inertia many times and then to come back to work. That's very difficult. Every single time that you overcome inertia is less likely that you'll get in that extra hour. So by working in longer chunks for the same amount of time, let's say you work in 3-hour chunks for a 9-hour interval, for a 9-hour day, you only have to overcome inertia 3 times to sit yourself down. But if you work in hour chunks, or even worse, Pomodoros, which are typically 25 minutes, then you have to overcome this inertia so many more times. If you work 1 hour, then that's 9 hours. 9 times you have to overcome the inertia. If you're doing 25-minute Pomodoros with 5-minute breaks, it means you have to overcome the inertia twice every hour, 18 times in your day, for just 3 for the 3-hour periods. Now you say to me, George, but I can't focus for so long. Yes, you can. You've written exams that go on for 3 hours, and you focus for that whole exam. So best believe you can also focus for the 3-hour chunk without it actually being an exam. And if you can't, all the more reason to do it, because it actually means that your attention is lacking and you need to work on it. And what better way to work on it than to force yourself to work on it, and to force yourself to work for extended periods of time. Now, it's also beneficial to work for longer periods of time because it allows you to transition in and out of focus. This is something that Cole Newport has talked about. Sometimes he said to overcome a certain sticking point in a maths proof, or to overcome a writer's block in one area, or to get over to phrase this difficult sentence in a way that's really going to land, it takes a lot of focus and effort. And so you'll focus deeply for you to finish this proof, or move through this next corollary, or to write this next sentence in the best possible way. And then you move back into a mundane or a less focused level as you go through things that you know how to do. And you'll continuously throughout this session dip in and out of high levels of focus. And this is kind of like a flow state. And that's the best way to work, because if you work in 25-minute chunks, it's very difficult for you to get into something or to truly focus. If something is something that's really difficult and it's going to take a lot of mental power to understand it and get through it, then if you're only working for 25 minutes, you might have to start thinking about it at the beginning of the 25 minutes, and you don't want to interrupt your train of thought by a needless break. So just the idea here is to work in longer periods. There's a lot of benefits. Then lesson 17 is to track your time spent working. If you are rooting for a particular result in your life, it takes effort and sacrifice in order to achieve that. And so one of the main metrics that you should be tracking in order to pursue this thing is time. If it's something else, by all means just replace time, but you need to track the most prosperous or the most profitable input that you can put into your endeavor, and track that so that you can increase inputs over time to give yourself the greatest chance of success. Lesson 18, the least cringy way is often the best way. So the reason why things are cringy is because we have deep set social systems and ideas of social scenarios built into our subconscious that aren't immediately rational. And so we might do something that rationally makes sense, but it feels cringy. And oftentimes it's best to not do that, and it's best to do it the least cringy way. I'll just give you an example so you can understand what I'm saying. So when I was posting some of the earlier videos on this channel, I heard that you need to have a hook. And so I would try and say a hook at the start, but it came across as inauthentic and it came across as cringy. When I would watch it back, I would think, shit, that was a little bit cringy. And so the best way is then not to do it the cringy way, is to do it the most effective way and to avoid the cringiness. So if you can do something in a less cringy way, it's often a much better idea to do that. Lesson number 19. Attitude is the most important thing you control. So attitude and energy levels and mindset, mentality, these things are things that are always in your control and things that you should always control. And this once again goes back to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. When he was in the concentration camps, there was very little that he had control over. The one thing that he does and did and always will have control over is how he perceives the world, his attitude towards it, and his mentality. So this, having the best attitude possible, is actually a moral responsibility of yours. So the only thing that you can control is how you align yourself virtuously with this world. And that was lesson number 6. Being virtuous is indescribably valuable. And so through that same lens, you have an obligation to have a good attitude, because that is the most virtuous thing in life. And you have an obligation to seek the highest virtue. Then lesson 19, that was lesson 19. Lesson 20, energy levels are everything, and get energy through your frame of mind. This is something I learned from Tony Robbins. So sometimes you'll look at someone and you'll see that they are high energy and this person is motivating. And oftentimes it's just a state of being. It's a mental state. It's a frame of mind, as opposed to a physiological thing or a physical thing, in the sense that sleeping more gives you more energy, or eating healthily gives you energy, or resting your mind can restore energy. All of these things are true, but the energy I'm talking about is a mental state. It's a state of being that you can get through a passion for life and through gratitude for life. So try and be as energetic as possible in everything that you do, and give everything that's important to you your all, and you will see fruitful results. Lesson 21 is to tell people when you are thinking positively about them. And the reason for this is because relationships are at the epicenter of finding fulfillment in our lives. Relationships are the most important thing for long-term happiness. And yes, there's gratitude that can help you be happy in any given moment, but in order to increase the baseline levels of happiness over time, the best way to go about it is to seek positive relationships and to invest yourself in relationships. Humans are social creatures, and to give ourselves fully to another person is extremely rewarding on a spiritual level for ourselves. And so if you are thinking positively about someone else, let them know. They will appreciate it, and it will help you, because it will develop a friendship that is rooted, or that is built on foundations of genuine sincerity. So it's not sufficient to tell people positive things about them sporadically, randomly, whenever you remember to say positive things, but it's much better to do it when you genuinely believe it, because then it comes across as authentic. And people aren't stupid. People always know when you have an ulterior motive. You think that people don't know, but they always know. How often have you sat there and you've listened to someone speak and you've thought to yourself, this person is seeming so inauthentic and sly, and there's something else going on here. Even if they are giving you the most positive and vibrant facade, there's still something that's off about it. And that's because our subconscious minds can pick up a lot of cues and handle data in a very different way to our conscious minds. And so our subconscious minds think of this thing and put all the pieces of the puzzle together and make an emotional judgment about the scenario. And if the emotional judgment is this person is inauthentic, it's probably going to be right. And I'm sure that you've experienced this in your life, and you've thought that this person is being authentic, and then you've later found out, or even later in that conversation, they wanted to ask you something, and so they came to you with this energy. So the idea here is to always be genuine and authentic. And if someone does impress you, or you do think positively about them in whatever way you find that they have dressed attractively on a particular day, let them know, because these things don't go unnoticed. And if you genuinely did believe it, then it will come across as genuine. And these type of compliments are worth it in the world, not just for your own good, but because it creates the world, it makes the world a better place. Yeah.